friend of mine, Andrew Chen from Andreessen Horowitz, who I believe celebrating a honeymoon and been here in Japan, doing a little bit of work and pleasure at the same time. Andrew and I have known each other for probably at least 15 years, I think. And he's really quite a genius and I would say a really fun person to be around. So he's going to be talking about the new gaming market. And please give him a welcome round of applause. Thank you. You can do that on stage.
Does this work? Okay, great, fantastic. Well, hello everyone, and Dave, thank you for having me at the conference. Last year, um, Andreessen Horowitz launched its first ever fund, completely focused, dedicated to the video games industry, and of course, being here in Japan, which has made such significant contributions over the past couple decades. Really, it's the category of software that has worked in Japan, and Japan's been able to export globally. This is just such a critical market, and there's a very interesting opportunity to build on the successes of the video games industry here and to build the next generation of startups. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Um, Now, many of you may already know that the business of video games is big, and of course it is. But the most interesting thing about the business is how much it's changed over the last 20 years. It used to be that you would go to a retail shop and you would go and buy a $40 cartridge, you'd stick it into your Nintendo or your PlayStation or whatever, you'd play it for a bunch of hours, and when you were done with it, you'd kind of put it aside. And so because of that, the games industry sort of was viewed as, yes, both a highly lucrative industry, but one that was kind of like movies, like a hits driven business that would get you a big spike. And then, that was it. And what's been really, really interesting over the last 2 decades has been the whole industry has transformed now into something that much more resembles the characteristics of a social network. And of course, here's a screenshot from Fortnite, which is often cited. This is a product that is fundamentally free to play. It's multi-platform. You play it with your friends. There's constant live updates that are happening. And what that means is people actually hang out with their friends in these environments. And, I could have put a Fortnite slide here, or it could have been Roblox or League or Minecraft or, many of the other big franchises. But really, these products are being used more like social networks than they are these cartridges that you kind of like stick in and that's it. And the reason for that makes gaming such a unique entertainment medium is that at its core, games are, of course, software. And so what that means is that every wave of software that then goes and hits all the other software categories actually comes back and reinvents the gaming industry as well. And so gaming started in arcades, and then it came into your home through the console. But then when the PC came and the internet came and mobile came, each of these new technological shifts actually not only changed the way that people could play games, because obviously you could now do it in the spare moments while you're waiting in line, or you could do it with your friends at a PC bong. But it also meant that the kinds of games that people engaged with were fundamentally changing. And so looking to the future, there's obviously a ton of activity happening in spatial computing. We're waiting on the release of Apple's new headset, and the Quest 3 and many other projects are going through. Web3 has gone through a wave, of course, and a lot of the next generation, everyone's very excited about Web3 gaming. And then, of course, generative AI is going to fundamentally change the way not only that gaming experiences happen for consumers, but also the way that they're built. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But each one of these new technologies really changes the industry. And so what we're really seeing is we're on this precipice of a bunch of new waves happening at once. And what's really unique about the gaming market is it means that whenever there is a new touch point and there's new formats to be consumed, we're seeing that people actually just consume gaming more and more and more and more. And so you're seeing the revenue just stack on top of each other. And when you contrast that to music or you contrast that to other entertainment media, over here, when we went from vinyl to cassettes to CDs, the usage and the market was, pretty much the same. And what that's meant is in the last 2 decades, the games industry is now bigger than Hollywood, music, and books combined. I mean, this is a mega industry. And we really believe that this next wave that's happening, driven by AI, driven by spatial computing, driven by Web3, is going to add to this even more. And so the question then, of course, and for the folks that are sitting here in Japan, having seen so many successes within the market here, as well as folks that are overseas that have seen the growth, the question is, how do you build the next generation of companies? How do you invest in the next generation of companies that are successful? And so for A16Z, we've really looked at all of this in 3 kind of large buckets, which I'll just describe to all of you. So the first is, what are the next generation gaming and virtual world experiences going to look like? If you allow for all of these to resemble the next social network, things that you're playing with your friends, things that you're experiencing with AI baked in, what are the new categories of gameplay that might be allowed? When the mobile platform came around, what we saw was many new categories of gaming, and we think that the same will happen for these new studios. The second category that we think a lot about is infrastructure, and in particular, how AI is going to fundamentally reinvent the process of building these games. Right. One of the things that's amazing is if you go play one of these games that's like Cyberpunk or Red Dead Redemption or one of these like kind of huge mega franchises, what you'll realize is that every single blade of grass, every single tree, every single level and corner has been actually handcrafted by a level designer and by artists that are there. And so, we imagine a world where that's going to be completely different, and people are going to instead, whether it's through text prompts or 2D concept art into some of these, or the editing tools are going to be different, or the game engines are going to be different, that the foundational tooling and the platforms that underlay these games is going to completely shift. And not only is that going to hit gaming, but a lot of those technologies are then going to go to all the other adjacent categories, whether that's movies and entertainment, whether that's architecture, whether that's manufacturing, anywhere where 3D is a major component of the industry. I think that'll be really important. And the final one that I want to mention is that, gaming is an ecosystem. And what we've seen is that there's a lot of new consumer behaviors that exist around gaming. That might be streaming, that might be VTubers, that might be esports leagues, that might be all the things that gamers are doing with each other that you wouldn't call it gameplay, but it is adjacent and it supports ultimately gameplay. And these have ended up being multi-billion-dollar outcomes, whether you're talking about Twitch and Discord and some of these. And so these are three of the big categories that we're thinking about. And in particular, AI, I'll just touch on this really, briefly. We actually did a really interesting survey of both the A16Z portfolio as well as the broader set of game companies and studios. And what we saw, this is about 200 companies, and what we saw is the games industry is very, very, very forward on the adoption of AI. They're already using it significantly for everything from art concepting to ChatGPT for how you interact with non-player characters inside the games, and much more. And so there's big efforts inside of all the big companies, Riot Games, Blizzard, others that are well documented, where they're the whole industry is moving forward on this. So it's definitely one that it's a very valuable industry that's being transformed right in front of us as we speak. And so, as I mentioned, last year, Andreessen Horowitz launched its first ever fund focused on the games industry. And so we're doing two things here, right? So one is having a fund that leads Series A's and B's. The fund is $660 million in our first effort. And then we have a second effort that's sort of folded in called Speedrun, which is the first accelerator that acts at the intersection of tech and gaming. And so in the most recent batch, this is actually the thing that reconnected Dave and I. Most recently, we actually had nearly 4,000 companies apply, and we select roughly 30 to 40 companies. We invest about 500K, and so this has been a really important effort for Andreessen Horowitz. Cool. I'll leave it at that.
So I thought we'd have a little bit of an interactive session here and talk a little bit about gaming, maybe talk a little bit about Andreessen, and maybe anything else that's on your mind.
Yeah, sounds great.
I guess to start with, so you covered a lot of different topics in gaming, and I guess maybe of particular interest has been there was a rush of interest in various forms of crypto, some of those combined with gaming. I think there's several different gaming environments that were trying to incentivize play with tokens, and that worked fantastic for a little while, and then maybe not so much. So any thoughts about whether that's completely dead, whether we're going to see a resurgence in that? How does sort of crypto and gaming fit together? And then maybe if it's different, I don't know about blockchain gaming is now everybody sort of like, oh, crypto's a bad word, but we can still say blockchain. So let's say blockchain gaming. And maybe if you can comment on one of the bigger players in the industry, Animoca, I think.
Yeah, I think so first I want to just say that one of the most interesting things about the games industry is that whenever there's a new technology wave, games is very nearly at the front of that cutting edge. And so you guys may know this, but it's amazing to think about now. But the first real 3D engine was built on not to do Pixar or whatever. It was to build games. It was John Carmack building 3D engines. The fact that NVIDIA exists in the GPU. The first GPU was actually integrated into a Nintendo cartridge. Amazingly enough, and so and then when you look at VR and when you look at Web3, no wonder the first thing that people want to do with it is they want to figure out how to build these entertainment experiences. So I think first and foremost that is a common recurring pattern. It's one of the reasons why the industry is so exciting. I think for Web3 in particular, look, I think it's undergone a very experimental period where people are trying a lot of consumer facing apps and trying to see what works. And I think, at least from my perspective, and we certainly have a good chunk of our fund invested into Web3 gaming. The way that we evaluate it is first and foremost, you need to build a game that's actually fun, that engages people. It's really that simple. And then I think the reality in the games industry is that people have been all those big revenue charts that you were looking at, a huge chunk of that is already being driven by virtual goods. And obviously the underlying technology is not necessarily blockchain, but I think gamers and consumers are very comfortable with that construct. And so I think to me it's an inevitability. Now, what blockchain is going to be built on, what's going to be can you sell virtual land before you actually ship the game, like all these mechanics. I think it's obviously all in the details, and I think the founders that are really passionate about the space are going to have to figure that out. But I think first and foremost they gotta ship a really, really good game.
So you mentioned a few examples in the beginning, and I don't know too much about these personally. I just know that my kids have spent a lot of time in them over the years. But Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite. I saw my kids go through each of those sort of generations and changes. I guess Minecraft first, Roblox second, and then Fortnite third. I don't know what's next or whether they're doing other stuff or. But those were huge environments. I'm sure they're still huge. So probably no question that gaming is an enormous market. I don't know if I are there stats you have on sort of like, domestic US or global spend annually on gaming? It's
Yeah,
hundreds
well,
of billions, right?
what I would say is, to make it really concrete, I mean, when you have a hit, you can have basically $1 billion high margin revenue line that seems to exist in perpetuity, right? I mean, I think that is what we're ultimately aiming for. And when you look at a property like World of Warcraft, I mean, World of Warcraft is 20 years old, right? It's a subscription based thing. And and it's still doing $1 billion of recurring revenue. I mean, there's very few digital franchises that have that kind of staying power. And so I think and that is why it's such an exciting place to invest in. Is you sort of have, especially with season passes and distribution through creators and streamers, you kind of have all the benefits of
We have the
building.
infinite view of ourselves. Right.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Trippy.
Yes, it's into the metaverse,
Right.
into infinity. So it has all the benefits of a social network, which is that they grow virally and organically, but you also monetize, quite well, and then you have the network effects that give it staying power over, now quite a few franchises are several decades old.
So maybe a couple of other areas that I find fascinating. You mentioned AI, which is obviously on everybody's mind, but I kind of want to bring up something that blew my mind about 3, 4 years ago. How many people in the audience know who or what KDA is? Oh, you guys are such old people. I feel so much younger now. Come on, KDA, no clue. Two people out of 100. Okay, all right, three, four. I'm 57. I know what KDA is all about. You guys are out of touch. Uh, Andrew, could you give us a short overview? So I'm just fascinated with like that group came on the, basically a K-pop music group, sort of US, sort of Korea, produced by League of Legends. Fantastic music, fantastic video, hundreds of millions of views. It's like in top 20 videos, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, I think the look, I mean, it's as you can tell from some of the charts and some of the conversations that we've
Sorry,
had.
Amy in the room. Can somebody tee up that video? Let's play it, please. It's like it's worth watching. It's super fun.
The because gaming is not just software, it's something that can be a cultural phenomenon. I think we're seeing a lot of really interesting kind of jumps across media. I mean, this year we had Last of Us, we had the Super Mario movie, we had the Harry Potter video game, which was huge. I mean, each one of these were huge successes, and I think we're just going to see more and more of that. And the Riot Games people, of course, they also created Arcane, which is on Netflix.
Fantastic, like the best, not just animated series on Netflix, like the best drama creative like series in my opinion. The artwork's amazing, right. The storylines are amazing, the music is amazing, like it's fucking fantastic.
That's right. And I think that is actually why we're going to look at video games as far as kind of broader IP the way that I think we look at comic books right now.
Yeah, it's like it's not just one thing. It's like games, merchandising, movies.
That's right.
Music.
That's right. And you have the characters, tickets. It's exactly. That's right.
Everything. And so like let's jump into AI. So like I don't know what the creative effort was behind Riot to put that together. It was astonishing. Like legit people were like, hey, this is like better than most K-pop that I see. It's like better than most other music videos. It was produced by a gaming company. Ostensibly to like, sell games, but like as its own art form, it was pretty fucking fantastic.
Yeah, and the Riot folks have been great at that in particular because they did that. They also obviously pioneered the whole esports scene as well, and then Arcane, and they have a bunch of other things that they're working on. So no,
mind-blowing
they're fantastic
stuff. So I kind of want more, and I guess my question is, hey, will AI allow us to start doing more of that faster?
Yeah, I mean it's going to be wild. I mean, I think one of the metaphors I use is, look, you can be, if you're J.K. Rowling and you decide that you want to write the next installment of Harry Potter, all you have to do is go grab your $1,000 laptop and go to a cafe and just start typing. And after you're done, it might take you a while, but after you're done, you publish that, and then boom, it's out there, and a billion people might read it, right? I mean, it's that's how it works. Amazingly, though, if you think about writing a book or taking a picture, right? It is very, very different as soon as you get to more complex forms of media. How many people does it take to make a Marvel movie? I don't know, hundreds, right? Like,
thousands,
I
I'm
mean,
sure.
like it's huge, right? Um,
100 million, like easy, probably a
right,
couple
right,
hundred million,
exactly.
right?
That's right. And then you ask the same question about building a video game. It's like, yeah, I mean, these video game teams are measured in the hundreds for a reason. And so I asked the
But like
question.
the other thing is like the gaming market is three times the size of
Right.
the movie market.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
didn't realize
Yes.
that stat when I was
Yes.
looking at that.
Yeah.
Like
Well, that's why I always ask people that are actually doing both. I was just at Sony earlier today. And I love asking the question, do you think of the movies more as advertising for the video games, or is that vice versa? And look, I mean, the answer is both, but it is a very interesting point. And so, but just to close on my J.K. Rowling point, I think we're going to get to some configuration where an extremely talented individual, the same way that they can go to a cafe, open up Google Docs, and then just start typing and write a book that reaches a ton of people, that we're going to have that same thing, but the output of it is going to be a single person sitting down doing the work, and then boom, a insane, something at the level of Red Dead Redemption, pops out, or GTA pops out, that previously would have taken $300 million and hundreds or thousands of people to do it, and we're gonna be able to do
now
it with
might
one
be a
person.
lot less expensive, a lot faster.
That's right. Yeah, and I think there's an interesting question then of like, okay, well, do the insiders who are really good at this stuff benefit, or is it going to be all of a sudden the millions of people that don't have the talent to make an interactive experience, that when given the tools, they're going to do what folks have been doing on YouTube and TikTok, which is you're going to have a new class of creators that
Should
can build
should
things
be
that like are really hard to imagine.
should be driving down price point for creation and driving down the size of teams. And like I think I would guess you'd be able to make a lot more bets and a lot smaller teams to come up with some incredible content and ROI.
That's right. That's right.
I guess we're in Japan, and we were just recently in Korea. These are two places that are kind of punching above their weight in terms of cultural output, particularly in music, animation, video, games. I'm guessing you're familiar with Miyazaki's work and all of that.
Yeah. In,
Does
in, in
your
fact, during my honeymoon, I went to Yakushima, which is the island. It's a kind of Japanese rainforest island that inspired Princess Mononoke, which
oh,
is great.
oh wow,
Yeah.
cool. And I think the new museum is open. I haven't been to the new museum yet. So does your investing get into those territories? I guess I've always been wondering why a lot of the animation shops and studios that do work, they're kind of tiny. Like that, they're relatively small operations here in Japan. There's a huge amount of animation that happens in Korea and the Philippines and other places, but like, why not put more venture capital into those?
Yeah, well, I think let me say two things. So this week, actually, we have a bunch of A16Z people here. Actually, Ben Horowitz is in Tokyo right now, and we actually have been doing a bunch of really interesting events. We actually had the Prime Minister actually come to a dinner setup that we had yesterday, with him and Ben talking about startups in Japan. So there's a big effort this week to spend more time in this ecosystem, and I think the reason is manifold. I mean, one is after several, and this is sort of what we ended up talking about, which is after several decades of sort of flatness in the economy, I think there's a newfound desire to take more risk and to do more, and part of that has to come from innovation. And of course, Japan has such a long history of innovation through all the different products that have been created and introduced to the United States. And so part of it is unlocking all of that talent. So I think we're very excited about that. And then I think for Andreessen Horowitz, we not only have the Games Fund, we have a team that's focused on health and bio. We have a team that's focused on American dynamism, which is sort of government and defense and education and a bunch of other
It's time
areas.
to build, Andrew.
Yeah, it's a time to build. Exactly. That's right. And so because of that, there's a lot of really interesting integration points. And then I think, to your question specifically about kind of, what do we invest in? What do we do? I think what we're finding in the games industry is that every one of the startups that we invest in has a strategy for how they want to interact with Japan. And sometimes it's working with the Sonys and Nintendos from a publishing standpoint. Sometimes it's potentially licensing IP that's been, inside of all of these, various studios and figuring out what to do with them.
Ton of amazing content.
Tons of amazing content. Yeah. So I think there's definitely a lot of interest, and in a world where you could take, Miyazaki's work and use it as an input into
some AI
3D models that would then build an open world, and I can have like a open world Princess Mononoke. Like, that sounds awesome. Like, that's what I want, right? And so
I think my nudiness here, but like, how many of you like watch AI generated trailers on YouTube? There's like 30-second AI generated trailers, like reimagining Star Wars done by Tarantino, reimagining Henry Potter done.
That's right. As a Balenciaga commercial.
Right. I was just gonna say the Balenciaga like style is like amazing. I really want us to show the KDA video. Can someone work on finding that for after the break? It's literally like the most number of views for any gaming video. So we talked a little bit about Andreessen, and I guess we could probably spend another hour on this topic. But I guess I've been watching since 2010. It's been an incredible run and growth, and I think you guys are pretty much the largest VC on the planet by either body. Maybe not by dollars, but pretty close. Maybe after Masa-san, although we'll see. But by bodies, I think, and probably by funds. Do you know how many funds there are that you guys are operating at this point?
Well, what I was going to say, so I joined the firm 6 years ago, and I think we had, maybe 80 people, and I think we're at maybe 550 or something like that.
Yeah.
For the entire team, kind of overall, and I think the reason why
that's 80 people in the investment team, 550 people.
Sorry,
total.
What I meant was when I joined in 2018, the whole firm was maybe 80 people.
Okay.
And we've since hired.
Now you're
up to now we're 550 overall. That's everybody, right? And the reason why I mention that is because most of those people, the vast majority, are not investors. I mean, I think one of the big new things that we did, that we're continuing to do, is to actually have most of the folks on the team as people who help the startups actually be successful
platform,
as opposed to being investors. And so what that means is, for the Games Fund, we've gone out and hired people that are from Supercell and Riot and Twitch and Blizzard and YouTube and all the top games companies, with the idea that that's those are the kinds of backgrounds and where we can actually help with people.
Anybody from Netflix to do show running?
we definitely have some Netflix people on the team, overall, but yeah, not yet for show writing specifically.
So on this idea of like starting funds, funding funds, I guess we have a large conversation about fund of funds earlier this morning. We have one coming up later after this. You guys are kind of your own fund of funds in a way. How does Andreessen Horowitz management think about starting a new fund, who to run those funds, how much money to put behind it? Is there, Ben and Mark just like coming up with their own ideas? Is that a democratic process?
Yeah,
I doubt it.
Yeah. So I think what we have found is that there is a tremendous amount of value if you're talking about going into an ecosystem that doesn't really understand venture capital, doesn't really understand, potentially what A16Z is, to be able to say, hey, you know what, we're planting the flag, and this is the Games Fund, and this is the crypto fund, and this is the,
$660 million used to be like an entire market, not just one fund. Like that was like 10 different funds.
Yes. And so what we find is that by creating these dedicated vehicles, it really lets the founders know that we're serious about the space. It's not just something where, it's kind of this little side project that we're doing. It's like a real thing, and we have real people that are dedicated to the actual fund. And so I think, we plan to keep doing new things. And so, what that means is I fully expect that, we'll continue this process of building these new vertical funds. And then I think some of our LP partners have been fantastic collaborators over the years.
One of which I believe is now the Tokyo government.
No comment. And so but one of the pluses of working with some of our partners, and these are all the major endowments and pension funds and and sovereigns and so on, is that they often want to invest in kind of the A16Z umbrella and support, a whole number of funds kind of underneath that. And so we were very pleased when we launched the games fund that the uptake among the LP base was so fantastic.
So $660 million, I believe the golden bar for a VC fund is 3x. I was always a question whether that's 3x net or 3x gross. But let's say 3x net for the moment. So that's what, $2 billion roughly speaking that you need to return. Let's say you own, I don't know, 15, 20, 25% at maturity IPO, maybe. So 6 times 2 billion, 5 times 2 billion. So how do you feel about trying to generate $10 billion worth of returns in order to be a successful $660 million VC fund?
Well, look, I think one of the things that we've seen over the last 10 years has been the actual tremendous number of really, really interesting companies like Roblox, like Supercell and Riot, like Mojang, which created Minecraft. There's so many interesting companies.
How many of those do you think you need to be a successful VC fund? Because I think it's more than one.
No, it's more than one. It's more than one. Yeah, of course. Well, but I also think that because the market is expanding so much, that the exits in this space and the kinds of companies we're going to build are just going to be much, much bigger.
So than there is. What do those companies look like numeric wise?
Well, I think the most interesting companies are certainly the ones that clear the $10 billion plus.
So it's not just a unicorn; it's a decacorn.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of these companies end up not just being games studio companies that just have multiple games, but they often have, like if you look at Valve or you look at Epic, they often have a game engine business or store business. They have their own platform that they're building. I think those are all very interesting. And then I think the other part I would add to this is, it's really, really beneficial that we're doing this at the same time as the AI revolution, because I think it's, these AI companies that are being started that initially target the games industry are going to ultimately be able to go after many, many more verticals. And so I think that's exciting, and it's kind of undefined as to how big those could be at the moment.
Okay. 2 last crazy questions before we wrap up here. So when do you invest in an entrepreneur that's an AI? Does that happen? How long? When or if does an AI take over your job and start doing investments? So when does AI replace entrepreneurs? When does AI replace VCs? Is that going to happen? How long is it going to happen? How much time do I have before I don't got a job anymore?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think the two parts of this. I think we all benefit, everyone in this room, we all benefit with the fact that the most interesting companies and the biggest trends are ones where there's no priors, there's no data, around it. I mean, if you were to look at all the data around, some of the great companies we've been involved with, and you were to say, okay, we're going to build a marketplace for, shared homes. You're like, well, how much data is there that's going to be a real thing?
I fucking passed on Airbnb, and I'm an idiot.
Were you trying to use prior data to train your,
I saw Brian when he was pitching the cereal boxes. I thought that was fucking stupid. My mistake.
Yeah. So I think because of that, some of the most interesting companies, there's just no data that it's going to work, and it's very speculative. And because of that, it's one of the things I would guess is some of the hardest to just build a historical model and then try to predict something. Actually, interestingly, there were a series of VC firms, I think this would have been 10 years ago, that tried to use, build these big data models to try to figure out, okay, what kind of founders, what kind of schools, what did they major in? Is 2 founders better, or is 3 founders? You can build these models.
Pattern match.
And one of the interesting things that you learn from the pattern matching is your model is just going to constantly output the startup's going to fail over and over and over again. And the reason is because
most of them do,
because they all fail, so if you're literally looking for,
by the way, most VCs fail too.
Really?
Yes.
And so I do think that you end up in a situation where if you just don't have any priors, it's just unclear how that's going
Come
to
on, let's
culminate
get
in a
down
way.
to numbers here. Will an AI replace an entrepreneur in your will you make a
Well,
$5-10 million bet on an AI at some point?
Well, I was going to say, one of the interesting things that people were investing in were these DAOs that kind of were like automated, like,
Everybody was saying
investing
that we're going to
things.
replace VC
And
DAOs. We're going
like,
to replace venture capital funds.
yes, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think because the most interesting opportunities will always be very, very novel. I hope that that we're safe from being replaced by AIs for a long time.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Andrew, thanks again for joining us, and good luck with that $660 million fund. No pressure, buddy.